I'm actually really excited for today's stream, but even more excited for tomorrow's conference. Because tomorrow we are hosting our first Serverless Data Conference. And that's actually also the reason why we are streaming this week on a Wednesday. I think it's the first time in the history of What's New in Prisma that we're not streaming on a Thursday, but that we're actually streaming on a Wednesday. And of course, that's because we have the conference coming up tomorrow. And we have a bunch of exciting talks that we're actually going to tease on today's episode as well. So we've prepared short 1-minute intro snippets for each talk. So if people are curious as to who the speakers are and what they're going to talk about, I think they'll get a good overview of that today. You've been quite involved with the conference, I think, in the last 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks, probably, Daniel. Are you relieved that it's finally going to happen and that all of this work is coming to fruition?
Absolutely. I mean, organizing conferences it's not as easy as it seems. When you are a viewer, you get this nice polished experience, but there's so much work that goes behind the scenes. So I guess I'll be a bit more relieved tomorrow after everyone sort of participates in the conference. But yes, absolutely. Good to be closer to this.
Yeah, and I think we also have a Slack channel for the conference, actually, right? So people can go and join our Slack, and then there is the Serverless Conference Slack channel, where I think we already have more than 1,000 people in there. I think was posted on our internal Slack. So yeah, really exciting to see that. But anyhow, as it's good tradition on this show, we are starting by talking about the most recent release that happened yesterday. So we were punctual with this release and were able to release it on Tuesday, as is our usual schedule for releases every other week. And I'm going ahead and share my screen so that I can walk everyone through the release notes and we can quickly see what is new in the Prisma tooling. So here we go. I think you can see my screen with the Prisma repo open.
Yep.
And if we navigate to the most recent release, then here we go. 3.5 is the version that we released this week. And yeah, we have good news for Postgres users that are using the full text search, which also only has been released fairly recently, I think, maybe 1-2 months ago. We released support for full text search in Postgres. And now you can also order the search results by relevance, which is just a feature that's also offered by Postgres directly. And now we are also offering this natively through the Prisma Client API.
Yeah, and it's probably worth pausing here. If you are using full text search, we'd love to hear your experience. We also have a feedback issue. So be sure, we're always curious to hear how it's working well for you and if it's working well. So yeah, be sure to use that issue and drop any kind of feedback that you have. We usually use this preview phase in order to gather this feedback so we can refine it and bring it to general availability.
Exactly. And this this GitHub issue really is where you have a direct point of contact to our product managers, to our engineers. So in this case, Matt, who's the product manager for the Prisma client team, who also appeared on this show already quite a few times, is your main point of contact there. The next feature that has been released on Tuesdays is more configuration options for indexes and constraints in the Prisma schema. So these are things that were already possible to achieve with Prisma before, but you always needed to kind of drop down to raw SQL, and there was no native representation of all that inside of the Prisma schema. So it wasn't quite straightforward to achieve it. You always had to kind of work around and drop down to a lower level defaulting or falling back to SQL in these cases. But now the length and the sort order of an index can be configured inside of the Prisma schema. Do you have anything to add to this feature, Daniel?
Yes. So the first thing is that in typical cases, you wouldn't necessarily need to explicitly define these two arguments. Those are the length and the sort order. But in situations where you're doing, for example, a lot of queries that you're ordering by multiple columns, that's when a lot of this can become useful. So the classic example is, for example, you have a table and you have, say, a model with ID created at and name fields. So just 3 columns in your table. And for example, you want to say make a query that orders the results or finds many users in this table and orders the results basically based on 2 columns. So for example, the name in descending order or ascending order and the created at in descending order. And in such situations, you might want to go ahead and define these compound indices where they are actually ordered in the order that you want to actually query them. But and I've seen a common question that comes up is, why not just go ahead and just create as many indices as you need? And the quick answer to that question is there are no free meals. So for example, whenever you introduce a new index, what the database does is that every time you create a new record in that table that has this new index that you introduced, the database actually needs to go ahead and update every index that is influenced by your insertion. And so every time basically your insertions and updates and deletions, they take a bit longer because the database has to update those indices. And so it's hard to make sort of general statements about indices. The best way to sort of approach this generally is to apply sort of the indices that are really important to you based on the query patterns that you know. And then, of course, introduce monitoring and observability into your app. And then when you see that there's certain slowness for specific endpoints or for specific queries, that's when you would typically go ahead, inspect the queries that Prisma generates for you, maybe even run explain analyze. And I can probably drop a link into a great talk that one of the Postgres core devs gave at a Prisma meetup. And this was Burkus. He's quite a big name in the Postgres community. And so explain analyze is really a way to sort of see how the query planner of the database is going to execute a query. And so to sort of sum what I just said up, basically start off with the indices that you know that you need. And then as you go along, observe your app's performance. A lot of this depends also on the volume of data that you have in your database. And then when you experience slowness, that's when you sort of go ahead, inspect the queries that are being generated. And then based on that, you try to optimize them and introduce the index that would optimize them based on that.
Right. Yeah, I really like the point that you mentioned about being aware of the query patterns of your applications, right? Because that's kind of key in order to understand where you have to create an index on which column in which table it makes sense. Because, yeah, like as you said, an index might make a read query against the database faster, but you always have to consider that the index is a separate data structure that lives inside of your database as well. And with every update to the like the records in your database, when you create a new one, the index needs to be updated as well. So the write queries become slower. So it's that kind of trade-off that you need to evaluate when it's about creating indexes in your database. All right, then.
And one last note on this,
yeah.
I think this is also yet another step that we've taken in more accurately representing your database schema in the Prisma schema. We did that with named constraints, which was a way to sort of have a more rich representation. And now we've taken yet another step closer to that vision of accurately representing your database schema by now introducing these 2 arguments for indices.
Yes, exactly. All right. And then the regular reminder also for folks that there actually is a version of Prisma that you can use in Golang, and we are continuously evolving it as well. So this week we have added case insensitive filtering for Prisma Client Go. And this is all documented in the Prisma Client Go repo. It also has the instructions for you how to get started. So if you want to dip your toes into the waters of Golang, or if you have friends that are Go developers and that are cursing about the lack of proper ways of working with databases in Go, then send them to this repo and let them know that there is a way to work with a database in a type-safe and really convenient way with Prisma. All right, then of course we have a quick call to action here for folks to like sign up for the Serverless Data Conference. We don't have to talk about this in detail now because we'll do this in just a few minutes when we move on to the next topic here on the stream. And then this is kind of a recursive thing now that we are already on the live stream that we're also mentioning in the release notes here. All right, I'll stop sharing my screen for now. And yeah, we talked about the Serverless Data Conference a little bit. And I have prepared a number of short teasers from the speakers that we have at the conference. So I think in total we'll have 2, 4, 6, 7 talks. They will be from companies like Cloudflare, MongoDB, Cockroach, Netlify, PlanetScale, Vercel. So really all of the companies that are big in the serverless space at the moment. And why don't we start with the keynote that our founder and CEO Søren gives alongside a couple of our team members, among them you and me, Daniel. So we also make our appearances in the keynote itself. We're not not part of this little teaser that I prepared, but let's see how Søren introduces the Serverless Data Conference to everyone. Oops.
Hello, everyone. My name is Søren. I'm the co-founder of Prisma. I'm very excited to welcome you to the Serverless Data Conference, where we will dive deep into the topic of databases for serverless applications. But why dedicate an entire conference to serverless data? Well, first, because serverless is a really exciting technology for developers. It allows you to start for free and promises to scale to massive production workloads with no infrastructure to manage. We have seen our community choosing serverless runtimes for their projects a lot. With services like Netlify and Vercel really leveling up the developer experience, it's really no surprise that developers are choosing to rely on serverless for their applications. But not all is well in this new world of serverless. While serverless compute feels like a mature technology by now, serverless databases still have a long way to go. Today, you will hear from some of the companies at the forefront developing serverless databases. And we will show you how the Prisma Data Proxy can help you to use more traditional databases in your serverless applications.
All right, and we had a little bit of an issue with the audio synchronization there, and I think that was actually just an issue with StreamYard itself, because I clicked on the clip once and then it didn't play, and then I clicked another time. But yeah, it was really interesting to hear what Søren has been saying, and what he also mentioned about the fact that serverless compute really is considered a very mature technology, and a lot of people are using it in production today and are taking advantage of its benefits. But serverless databases really aren't quite there yet in many regards, right? Although, of course, this this week with the launch of PlanetScale, I think there was a huge step forward in the ecosystem, and we're excited that this is happening and lining up exactly with our Serverless Data Conference, of course. But in general, I think this is still a space where companies are evolving and solutions are maturing. And yeah, but it's nice to have these kinds of folks at the conference as well to talk about what they're working on.
Absolutely, yeah.
And yeah, I'm also excited about the keynote otherwise, because we'll show people really what the current capabilities of the Prisma data platform are. So you, for example, Daniel, you'll speak about the data proxy. And then we'll talk about some of the ideas that we have to expand the functionality of the Prisma data platform further. So for example, I'm going to give a presentation on the idea of what we call preview databases, basically a way to couple preview deployments that you might be familiar with from Netlify or Vercel with their own database, which makes it really easy to have a fully isolated preview deployment, including the database, which at the moment is possible, but just a real hassle to set up. And an integrated workflow that we're thinking of for the Prisma data platform would be really valuable here, I think. All right. How about we go and watch the next teaser from Hassan, who is a developer advocate at Vercel. Let's see what they have prepared.
Hello everybody, and thank you so much for coming to my talk on how to build serverless applications using Next.js and Prisma. My name is Hassan. I'm a developer advocate at Vercel, and I'm so excited to talk to you about this topic because honestly, databases are difficult, and I want to show you how easy Prisma makes them. I'm going to break it down from scratch, explaining Next.js and Prisma, then go into some live coding to build out a full stack contacts application. So let's get right into it. In this talk, we'll briefly discuss Next.js and some of its main features, then introduce Prisma, and then finally, we'll be doing some live coding, which will be the majority of the talk.
All right, the same audio issues, but I think people have gotten the gist. Yeah, so this seems like a very practical talk that Hassan is going to give, a good live demo that shows what's possible with all of these serverless technology when you put them all together. All right, moving on. And this is actually the talk that I think I'm most excited about at this conference. And that's the talk from the PlanetScale folks. Who I just mentioned, they launched for general availability just this week. And yeah, PlanetScale is a really exciting product. So let's see what they have prepared.
Thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm really excited here today to have Sugu, PlanetScale CTO, for a chat. I just want to thank him for taking out the time to join us today.
Thank you. I'm excited too.
Yeah, we have some really interesting questions. You know, we're really excited to be here today at Prisma Serverless Conference, where, you know, more and more Prisma users are building in serverless environments. And in a serverless world, traditional database need to scale differently. They need to be on, you know, rock solid infrastructure so it can handle this scale in a serverless world. And a lot of people don't know that PlanetScale is built on top of an open source technology called Vitess, and it has scaled incredibly. And so I want to learn more about Vitess. I want to learn why it scaled so well. And yeah, so first question, why did you build Vitess?
All right, I think we're not getting rid of the audio sync issues on this stream today, but I think everybody can live with it. Yeah, that sounds super exciting. I mean, hearing a little bit of the backstory of how Vitess has been built and why and what kind of problems it needed to solve back then, I think is super interesting. And yeah, it will be a very insightful talk.
It's also kind of fascinating. I think the viewers will discover tomorrow, but to really suddenly see technology that came out of, you know, some of the real challenges that they were facing at YouTube, now it's available to any developer, and you can sign up to PlanetScale, a bunch of clicks, and you're good to go pretty much.
Yeah, and in the Prisma data platform, actually, this is already part of it, I think, that you can actually set up your PlanetScale database directly from the web interface of the Prisma data platform. So if you go to cloud.prisma.io and just follow the onboarding flow, it'll be really straightforward for you to get up and running with a PlanetScale database using one of our predefined schema templates, and even deploy the application to Vercel. So all of this is an integrated workflow in the Prisma data platform that you should definitely check out if you haven't already. All right, we have a few more talks that we can tease. So let's move on with Cloudflare this time. Here we go.
Hey everyone, my name is Greg McKeon, a product manager here at Cloudflare. I work on Cloudflare Workers, which is our serverless platform. Super excited to be here and talk to you all today a little bit, both one about the Workers platform, but also about the Prisma data proxy and how that integrates into Cloudflare's Workers platform and really lets you build some cool apps and some cool architectures that we're really starting to explore together.
All right, so this is all about the use case of using Prisma Client inside of Cloudflare Workers and being able to talk to databases from Cloudflare Workers, which has been really difficult in the past. But with Prisma Client and the data proxy, this also becomes a really straightforward workflow. So again, something that Prisma Client enables that hasn't really been possible before. All right, then we have the talk from MongoDB. Let's tune into the teaser that we've prepared for this.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation and demo. We're excited to show you some new capabilities which will make it easier for you to build and deploy serverless applications at scale with Prisma and MongoDB. My name is Kevin Jernigan, and I'm a product manager at MongoDB on the MongoDB Atlas serverless team. Prior to joining MongoDB in February of this year, I'd spent most of my career working on relational databases. I worked for Oracle twice, and most recently for Amazon Web Services, managing the launch and growth of Aurora Postgres. I joined MongoDB because I'm excited about how much easier it is to build applications with MongoDB as compared to relational databases, and I'm double excited about MongoDB Serverless and the whole serverless application paradigm. With me is Matt Muller, a software engineer at Prisma. He will give a demo of Prisma Data Proxy working with MongoDB Atlas Serverless.
Yes, so if people have followed our What's New in Prisma episodes, then you actually are already familiar with the demo, I think, that Matt is going to give in that talk, because he gave it 3 episodes ago. It's already a while back, I think, here on the stream as well. So if you can't even wait to really learn what this is about, then you can also go back to that stream and just watch Matt's demo from back then. But otherwise, I think it'll be a fresh and new demo with all the latest and shiny things that we have in store tomorrow as well. So again, definitely tune in for that one. Yeah, and the next one, second to last talk that we're going to tease today is the one from CockroachDB, and this was really lovely to see the intro because there is a furry guest appearing in the talk.
Welcome to Serverless Code More. This is Atticus. He's the bestest boy. He's my 8-month-old tricolor Pembroke Welsh Corgi. You're probably going to see him running around in the background while I do this talk. Hi, I'm Adrian. I'm Atticus's human. I'm also a developer advocate at Cockroach Labs. You can find me most places on the internet, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, as It's Adrian. And if you're interested in seeing more pictures of this guy, yeah, you can check out my Instagram. It's basically all it is now. Okay, we're gonna let you down. All right. So the term serverless has been overused. Let's take a minute to make sure we're on the same page.
All right. Yeah, so Cockroach, another one of these serverless databases that promises to kind of scale in infinitely. Like really exciting to also have them on at the conference.
And for sure, their title, I think, wins the best title for the conference. Serverless, code more.
Yes, 100%. That's like, I haven't heard this one, and it's a nice kind of wordplay here. I definitely liked it. Do you know by any chance, actually, like Daniel, where we are with cockroach support? I know that there have been some internal conversations about this, but I actually haven't been following closely. Is this something that is coming soon?
Yeah, I don't know exactly how soon we will have a preview version that is available for users to play with, but I know that we're actively collaborating and that we've just recently integrated Cockroach DB into our current test suite. So
okay.
As it stands now, I believe one of the main constraints is migrations and introspection. But you are able essentially to already use to some degree Prisma with Cockroach DB. And I won't give away much more because I want to leave some for the actual talk tomorrow that Adrian is going to give.
All right. Yeah, that's good to know. And the last talk that we have tomorrow is from Jason Lengstorff from Netlify. Very nice guy. I have been on his show, Learn with Jason, a few months ago, and that was a very nice experience. So I'm also very happy that we could get him as a speaker at our conference as well. Let's see what he has prepared.
What's up, everybody? My name is Jason Lengstorff. I'm the VP of Developer Experience at Netlify and the host of Learn with Jason. I'm really excited to talk to you about what's possible with web applications today and without needing to become a truly full stack developer. But I thought it would be more fun, instead of me just telling you, I'd love to show you. So what I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to build a Vite app using Vite.js. We're going to build it with Preact and TypeScript. I'm going to use PlanetScale as a database, and I'm going to connect that database to my TypeScript app using Prisma. And then we're going to deploy the whole thing to Netlify. So we're going to do that all in the span of about 20 minutes. So, buckle in. This is going to be a bit of a speed run, but I just want to show you how much power we have as developers today to build a whole lot without a whole lot of time. We're going to start out in the terminal.
All right. This seems like another very practical talk with a nice demo. And again, PlanetScale is making an appearance. So PlanetScale, I think, is one of the big winners also of this entire conference in terms of the exposure that they're getting there. And that's well deserved, I think. All right.
Absolutely.
For the next section on today's stream, I think we'll have to let you go already, Daniel. But I'm excited to talk to Serghei from Elsevier. So thank you, Daniel, and see you in 2 weeks again.
Thanks, Niko. And see you soon.
Bye-bye. And I'm bringing up Serghei from Elsevier to the stream. Hey, Serghei, how are you doing?
Hi, Nicholas, and hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Can
yes,
you see me?
I can hear you. We can see you. Where are you joining us from, actually?
I'm based in Amsterdam.
Okay, so we're in the same time zone, and it's probably also already dark in Amsterdam after kind of daylight saving time ended.
It is, and I have a window in front of me, and I see a full moon, so it's kind of inspiring. It's really nice.
All right. Yeah, we brought you on today to chat with you about the project that you've been involved with at Elsevier. And let me preface this by also dropping a link into the comment section again to the article and the customer story that we recently published on the Prisma blog. So just this week, actually 2 days ago on Monday, we published the story of how Elsevier is using Prisma and what exactly it's being used for at Elsevier. So yeah, I thought it would make sense to bring you on to talk about your experience using Prisma in this project, and just in general a little bit about the project itself, of course, as well. But to kick things off, Serghei, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your own background and how you got to working with Elsevier in the first place.
Sure. So my background, well, from a technical perspective, with the coding in general and building stuff, it starts back in 2010 when I started learning coding, because I am a self-learner. And I started in the beginning just working on ideas for myself with friends. And after a while, I'd even starting doing that for clients. So I did a little bit of freelancing in the beginning. And that converted into a whole journey that brought me to Amsterdam later on, where I worked for a couple of companies in a permanent role. But then I went back to freelancing full time. So even right now, currently, I'm still a freelancer. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's the initial experience in Amsterdam as a freelancer. But then I joined Elsevier in 2017, and maybe we will see some details about that later, specifically about the project that I'm working on right now.
Sure. Have you been involved mostly with the Node.js ecosystem, or did you dip your toes into other programming languages and ecosystems as well?
I did start with PHP in the beginning. So 2010, that meant jQuery, JavaScript.
The old days.
The old days. Later on, a little bit of Backbone, but mostly JavaScript. So that's my main focus, I would say. Mm-hmm. I did, learn other things. I did some Android stuff in the past. So Java, Python, but not much. Mostly JavaScript and Node.js.
I see. All right, let's move on. And maybe before we start talking about the concrete project that you were working on at Elsevier, can you tell us what Elsevier does as a company?
Sure. Elsevier as a company goes way back, I think, hundreds of years, because it started as a scientific material publisher. And in the beginning, it was publishing. That's an interesting fact, actually, that I learned recently, that it was publishing books from Galileo Galilei. So there's quite some heritage there. And it started as a publisher on books, but today Elsevier is an ecosystem, probably, and it offers all sorts of tools and platforms to researchers and healthcare professionals to do their job best. And that's data analytics, all sorts of tools for labs, healthcare professionals, meaning hospitals. And there's plenty of products. I don't even know them all, maybe over 100. I really don't know.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, then, can you tell us a little bit about the project that you've been involved with recently at Elsevier? That was also the main topic of the article that I just dropped in the comments.
Yeah, the current project that I'm working on is the one of the customer story. Is it started on? I've done several projects for Elsevier, but this one started on just before the pandemic, so last year in March. And it started from a team of 3 people. So myself, Paul Faulkner, which is VP of Product in Elsevier, and Inge Schutzen, which is a very talented UX designer. And the project started from a mission to speed up or to reduce the time of the publication journey. So from submission of a manuscript until it's actually published. And published, I mentioned before, it was in books, so it starts from history. It starts as published articles in books or on paper, but nowadays it's more digital. Probably there is still some paper publishing, but mostly digital. And our mission was to look at ways to reduce the time, because on average is, I think this is industry-wide, but I can tell maybe approximately 150 days. That's the average, which is a lot. And that means that there's some scenarios where subject areas where it's maybe shorter and others longer. So you can imagine that's months that an author, a researcher would have to wait until an article is published. So there's a bit of a legacy from the system and from the old systems and from probably the mindset that comes from the old way of publishing on books. So there's a lot of manual processes. There are several steps involved to publish an article, and there's a lot of manual work involved. Mm-hmm. And our mission was to look at ways to with leveraging technology, to look at ways to reduce that time from, as I mentioned, from beginning till the end of the journey. So that's how this project started and where I basically adopted Prisma.
Gotcha. So it was really about making the peer review process as it stands more efficient with some kind of technology that you would have to build yourself in that context.
Exactly. You're raising a good point, because I mentioned the whole journey, but actually the pain point where the most of the delays happen are in the peer review process. So from the beginning, the steps that I mentioned before are submitting, some approvals by editors, some selection, all sorts of journeys where, directions that an article could take. But the biggest chunk of this journey is the peer review part. And that's other peers in the same subject area looking at the article and making sure that that's high quality science.
I see. All right. Yeah. So let's get into the technical bits of this project. From the get-go, what kind of did you evaluate as the technical requirements for this project? It was more of an MVP style thing that you've been building there, right? Or was it already an application that was to go fully in production?
No, it started as an MVP. So it started, actually, that's interesting, because we had no technical requirements. So there was the mission, and you figure out how to achieve that. Mm-hmm. So initially there was no idea how we would do this, but we had a very fast learning cycle. So every week we would speak to researchers and to real users and find out more about their real problems. And that was a crucial part for us to make sure that we would take the right steps and build potentially the right things for them. And once we built them, we went back to the users and tested with them again to make sure that they are actually reflecting their expectations and the behavior or the mindset that they have in a specific process.
Right. Okay, so then without any technical requirements and only the mission to accomplish here, what was the tech stack that you went with?
So in the beginning, I just put together a little proof of concept to prove the concept. So to make sure to kind of create something tangible that could go in front of users and make sure that works for the users. And I was looking for different frameworks. I've been doing projects in other frameworks like Adonis and some other stuff in the past, so I knew that very well. And having a very fast learning cycle, I knew that we needed to move very fast in this process, because we had a limited kind of soft limit of amount of time that we needed to figure out, or to kind of achieve the mission, not necessarily achieve the mission, but have an idea of a solution that could achieve that mission, because it's more a long-term mission. But I knew that we needed to move fast. So the choice of technologies were very important. And I did try different things myself. And that's how I came across Prisma, because I started by having a technical requirement myself, which was GraphQL, because we knew what we needed to achieve, kind of, and peer review, that means commenting or a conversation around a piece of content. And since the beginning, we had the idea to convert the scientific manuscripts, which are technically Word documents, in the current standards. So we grab them, convert them to HTML, render them on a page, and then throughout the whole journey, the peer review and all the conversation, the communication happens around that page. So having in mind that we need to have conversations or commenting threads, if you want, and plenty of other resources that are necessary for the front end, I thought GraphQL really would make sense for that. So starting from that, first step, I knew that I needed to find something that really made sense or worked well with GraphQL. So that's how I came across Prisma. Mm-hmm. And I remember in the beginning, I said to myself, like, if I would adopt something now when I need to move fast, and I would even have a learning curve, that would be, just counterproductive. I needed to use something that I knew well. I didn't like what I used in the past, what I knew well. So I adopted something like Prisma proved really good in that sense that you have built-in documentation because it's TypeScript. So you just type, and the autocomplete part of it was super helpful element in that process. Because if you write something and you have to check documentation, the shape of the thing you need to write, so I don't know, an update or a create or something, and then you have to go look at the documentation how you need to write that. That's a lot. It's time consuming.
It really slows down your development for sure.
Exactly. So when I did my little experiments and I saw how fast I could go even without knowing anything about Prisma, that was really a winning point and made me go for it, for Prisma in that case.
All right. So a bit of a side track conversation here, but I quickly want to ask this because I don't know many people that have used Adonis.js in projects before, and I just was curious. I've heard of it, and I was curious about your experience with it, and maybe what was the requirement to, or your requirement to use GraphQL the only reason why you didn't use Adonis for this project, or were there other kind of friction points that you experienced maybe in the past that made you choose another stack this time?
Now I need to remember, but basically Adonis did not really work well with GraphQL. So you'd have to do a lot of workarounds to offer a good developer experience. And in my personal view, the developer experience, it's really, really important. So the smoother you can move forward, the faster you can go. And in our case, that was really crucial to move fast.
I see.
So that was one of the things, I guess, that didn't make me go for Adonis, because GraphQL just didn't work well with it.
Yeah, makes sense. All right. How is the app being deployed? What's kind of the infrastructure layer of this entire project?
Well, it's AWS, and we have a Kubernetes cluster, but it's the whole application, it's split in multiple services. So some Lambdas, some nodes in the cluster that do conversion, file uploading, and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And we use GitHub Actions to build and deploy the application. And it's pretty simple, actually, pretty straightforward, because as this was a pilot or an MVP, it started from a small team. It still is a small team until actually December. So very soon the team size will grow, and it's just been myself. So I had to, find a balance between what really needs to be done to make it work and to have some sort of skeleton to move forward, and also not spending too much time to overdo things that are not necessarily crucial at this moment.
All right. Cool. Is there anything that you can maybe show us from the project itself? Either walk us a little bit through the code, or maybe give a demo of what the app actually looks like. We talked about this a little bit up front, but I don't know if that's actually something you can do. So,
well, sharing what the product does, I can't really do that because it's not yet published,
Public.
not yet live. It's still a pilot with just few journals that are already in the Elsevier portfolio. But maybe just a little bit of a sneak peek what the project looks like. Maybe I can do that, and let me know if you see my screen.
Yes, there it is.
You see the code? Am I sharing the right thing?
Yeah, perfect.
So basically, I just want to highlight just quickly how the project structure was really, really beneficial and really helping me moving fast.
Is this a monorepo?
Yeah, it's a monorepo, and there's an API, a front end, some lambdas, some packages, and that's where we come to Prisma. So I did extract Prisma with the whole schema and migrations and generated types in a separate package, which I import. This is the front end, for example. So I can import the types everywhere. So that proved to be a really interesting thing, because whatever I have in the schema, and specifically things that are very helpful, like enums, which you know that exactly these values will go into your database, you can basically import them directly into your front end, or the API, or a Lambda, or whatever you want, and make sure that you're using exactly the right types. You're checking against the right types. So this kind of type safety was really, really great for me, because I could keep track. This project is already huge. Like, it's way too big for one person. That's why this is the scaling phase, kind of, and the team is growing. And
one quick question about this, like, Serghei, about this particular thing that you import the enum into the front end. You are using GraphQL as the API layer, right?
Yes.
So wouldn't the type that's needed on the front end, wouldn't that actually be determined by the GraphQL schema rather than the Prisma schema? Or why is the type from the Prisma schema useful on the front end in this context?
It's useful, and I think that could become a little bit of a interesting discussion. But basically, what really is a benefit here is that I have those enums that are strictly exactly the ones that are in my database, which is interesting. But then, if we look at what let's see if I can pull this off now, what my GraphQL types look like, it's basically I have a bit of a proxy that would pick only the things that I actually need in the front end. So if I don't fetch, I don't know, something from a resource, like, because I don't need it in the front end, I can't use the original type from Prisma, because if I would do dot and, I don't know, something else from this row in the front end, it will give me as available. So I'm picking only what I'm fetching to make sure that if I check against the row in the front end, I'm sure that I'm not going to do something like created at, because I don't have it in there.
Interesting.
Does that make sense? So
yeah.
that's why I'm importing everything from Prisma, so all the types, and I'm filtering out. Maybe there's a better way to do this, but this is the way that I just came up with. So it works well for me.
Yeah, for sure. No, I was surprised, because usually I would have expected the kind of relevant types to be determined by the GraphQL layer. But I guess in that context, it makes sense to use the Prisma types as well. Speaking of the GraphQL layer, how did you implement it actually? Are you using schema first, or Nexus, or what's your approach to build the GraphQL schema?
So, well, the schema, the database schema is just the Prisma schema, but I'm using Nexus in the API. So all the resolvers are powered by Nexus in that case.
All right.
So I have all these entities. I'm a little bit, this is still a pilot project, so I'm a little bit careful not to expose maybe also sensitive data or things. But
Sure.
Just to give you the idea, this is how my queries and resolvers look like. And I even have custom ones. So something like this. There's a bunch of to-dos, but to give you the idea.
That looks really nice. Great. All right. Yeah, I think we can slowly wrap this up. But before I let you go, 2 more questions. So what were some of the major friction points that you experienced during development, be it related to Prisma or not, just in general? I'm curious.
Well, as technical challenges in the beginning for this particular project was to convert Word files to HTML. So then I came across Pandoc, but there are some other services, and it's not easy to find a good one to do that kind of conversion properly, especially when you have manuscripts which contain maybe images or signs or tables, all sorts of things inside. From a Prisma perspective, I think in the beginning I was a little bit confused and maybe I still am. I what, like in a resolver, you fetch an entity, like, I don't know, a user, which from the front end, as in a query, you would only pull maybe ID and first name. But in the resolver, you query everything from the user. So what actually is sent to the client? Is it everything that comes from the query and just filtered out? Some of those confusions, like how it's set up.
Right. That question about like fetching the entire entity inside of a resolver like comes up quite often, and the way how that's actually solved is or like how that actually works is that the kind of GraphQL resolver system, it indeed takes care of like filtering only the like relevant fields. And what you typically do in a resolver, you indeed fetch all the fields from the database, even though in the GraphQL query, not all of the not all of the fields of that model might have been requested. This has been pointed out by a few people in the past as an inefficient approach. I guess you can argue like that, but this is usually not the performance bottleneck of any application. So you would really need a huge table with a lot of columns and with a lot of rows for that to actually become a performance bottleneck. And if that happens, then there are quite a few techniques also, again, to kind of mitigate this. But I think it's just kind of the common way to just fetch all the fields of a model in a resolver.
Yeah, so that was just a little bit of maybe a part of the learning curve in the beginning. But I think another thing that I was a little bit struggling at the beginning to keep up with the Nexus and Prisma versions. So if I would update Prisma, Nexus would break. So I had to kind of figure out some sort of process where I was just waiting before updating Prisma. I'm still actually stuck with version 2.3 because
right. The update for Nexus Prisma hasn't happened yet, right?
Exactly. And it's a bit of refactoring and a bit of things to do, and we will do that when the team is bigger. And the other thing, I think in the beginning, which was great because I spoke to a colleague of yours from Prisma about it, and it was importing types directly in the browser. So if the generated types by Prisma, if I would pull them in the front-end application, it was breaking because it was pulling in some runtime code, I think. And that was solved in a later version, so that was great.
Nice
to see. So these are a few things that I think were, discovery elements.
Some hurdles. All right. All right. Last question for today. And I think you already hinted at one thing that you really liked about Prisma, and that's the auto completion. Was that actually your most favorite thing about Prisma, or was there anything else that you want to point out when it comes to things that you really liked about Prisma when working with it?
That is definitely my top in my top 2. So built-in documentation, instead of going to the documentation page, you just maybe go to the type definitions, and you can see what you can do in an operation. And well, type safety, the fact that it's all written in TypeScript, and how it works well, at least in my case, because everything is TypeScript, backend and front end, really works well together. So if I change something in the database that, an enum, or remove a column or something, automatically everywhere I will see that, because TypeScript will complain about the different type or missing type, so that's huge value, which helped actually with moving forward fast, because in my case, I had to potentially remove parts of the application at some point because they didn't work. It was a learning cycle, and it's still a pilot, it's still an MVP, so there's much more to learn. And this is crucial when you have to move fast, to be able to just remove a part of the application and have that in, being a smooth operation, instead of having to deal with it and struggle, which can become a nightmare.
Yeah, the type safety is definitely one of the biggest benefits, I think, that people get from working with Prisma. So big +1 on this from my side as well.
And
All
also,
right, Serghei. Yeah.
Last thing, because it's also in my top 2, the migrations, because Adonis before, I would have to, in other frameworks, you would have to write up and down. So the up and down of a migration, the fact that I can just change the schema, the Prisma schema, and the migration is generated automatically, that's huge. Big plus.
Yeah, the migrations definitely are also very nice, and the way how to model your data in the Prisma schema also repeatedly gets called out by folks as something that they really enjoy when using Prisma. All right, thank you, Serghei, for joining me today. I'll let you go now.
Thank you for inviting.
Yeah,
looking forward
bye-bye.
some more awesome stuff from Prisma.
Thanks. Cheers. All right. And with that, I think we are at the end of today's episode. Great to see everyone here, and I hope to see you all tomorrow for the Prisma Data Serverless Conference, and then again in 2 weeks, again on a Thursday. Cheers, everyone.